Welcome to the Bad Boys 3.0 off-season edition, where today we are going to talk about blockbuster trades involving the Pistons. And now when I say blockbuster, I mean we want to talk about guys that have either made All-NBA teams, have made All-Star teams, or are going to make All-Star teams. We're going to have a lot more coverage during the off-season of maybe more realistic trades, about the draft. We're going to talk about free agency. But right now, I want to give the people what they want a little bit. I know we're coming fresh off the season, and I'm going to address the elephant in the room here about how I left you hanging with the Cavs series. But like I said, today I want to focus on blockbuster trades for the Pistons. I want to acknowledge the elephant in the room. I left everybody hanging for the Cavs series. I underestimated three major things when producing that podcast. The first and foremost is trying to record and edit and release a podcast before everybody wakes up the next day was a lot more work than I anticipated. Number two, I thought I was going to get some more help with all that work that I didn't anticipate.
Whatever.
And number three, recording a podcast after your team loses in the middle of the night, there's not a lot of motivation at that point when you're trying to break down that your team doesn't have any playmaking or shooting. All three of those combined, I, for my own mental health, did not finish that Cavs series with you guys, and I apologize. I will be ready next year with a team and with a plan, and we will get it done. Back to the topic of the day, blockbuster trades. Now, I got 7 good ones. I got a few honorable mentions, and then I got a few just horrible ones that I'm going to ask you, if you see the article on Bleacher Report that says fake Draymond Green trade to the Pistons, I'm just going to ask you not to click it.
I got this.
Like I said at the beginning, these are all going to be real trades. All these trades will work under the salary cap. That's really key when it comes to people just posting random fake trades. It really, really makes me mad when people start talking fake trades and they don't work under the salary cap, because there is no reason to talk about a fake trade if it doesn't work under the salary cap. Everything we're going to talk about today fits under the salary cap. Essentially what I did was went in the trade machine, double checked it against another trade machine, and got the salaries to work. Now, we can haggle on the picks that go along with these trades, but all these trades work under the salary cap. First honorable mention that I just made a joke about. Yes, you can package Isaiah Stewart and Marcus Sasser and trade it for Draymond, and that works that works under the rules. I don't see any reason why we would do that. So let's get into the real honorable mentions. And there's 2 more that, big names. I don't think they will happen, but both of these guys could be traded this offseason, and I guess the saying would be, why not us? First one, Kevin Durant. He's not coming to Detroit, but you could put a trade together that involved Kevin Durant and Clint Capella coming to Detroit. And if we sent Duncan Robinson, Isaiah Stewart, Karis LeVert, and Ron Holland to Houston, that would work under the salary cap. Now, Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. I have no idea where he wants to play basketball next year. And so I would assume that most Pistons fans look at this trade and go, yuck. There will be a small portion of Pistons fans that look at this trade and go, oh my God, Kevin Durant is literally the missing piece on our team. And if we had him, we're probably the best team in the East.
Dude, we're backing out of the situation and letting him take the responsibility.
I don't subscribe to that theory, but I guess it's not crazy if you do. The second giant contract that I don't actually think is going to happen is Kawhi Leonard. Now, Kawhi's got the aspiration scandal still being adjudicated, I guess, by the NBA on how they're going to handle that with the Clippers. There's a lot of conspiracies that go along with that aspiration and what the punishment's going to be. But also, the Clippers did get the number 5 pick from the Pacers in this year's draft, and so it would make sense for them to build their roster around this number 5 pick, and trading Kawhi to get younger assets, to get more draft picks, would make sense for the Clippers. And so I do think you might see Kawhi traded this summer. Do I think it's going to be to the Pistons? No. But if the Pistons packaged Duncan Robinson, Isaiah Stewart, and Karis LeVert, that would equal about $46 million, and Kawhi makes $50 million, and that would work under the rules. Do we need to add the 21st pick in with that to make it work? I don't think we're going to add 2 first-round picks in that to make it work. But there's a chance that there's a team out there that would give 2 first-round picks for Kawhi Leonard plus salary that matches that is better than ours. a lot of these trades, as we go through the more serious ones, you're going to hear the same names coming out of the Pistons every time. So you're going to hear the names Isaiah Stewart. I think Isaiah Stewart is in every single fake trade that I have here. We essentially need to find a team that values Isaiah Stewart. That's a big part of making one of these quote-unquote blockbuster trades is finding a team that values Isaiah Stewart, and that's not that ridiculous. He is a dominant paint defender. He brings a certain energy to the game that a lot of teams desire. The Pistons, we could still use him. It's not like we need to trade him. It's just one of those things where you need to trade good players to get good players, and he's one of our more expendable good players. And so, like I said, you're going to see his name a lot in all these trades. So Isaiah Stewart, number one. Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson will be two other names you see in these trades, mostly for salary cap reasons. You need to get a Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard, which we're not going to get. You got to get to 54 or 50 million a year, and Isaiah Stewart makes 15 million, and Ron Holland, the other guy who you're going to hear in almost all these trades, he makes 8.5 million. So, between those two guys, you're at about 23.5 million. And you need to get to, you need to get to 50 in some of these trades. You need to get to the mid 30 millions in some of these trades. And so the Pistons have a roster that is built very well to make trades. We have Duncan Robinson's $16 million contract, Isaiah Stewart's $15 million contract, Karis LeVert's $14 million contract that add up to, $45 million or almost $46 million. That pretty much gets you anybody in the NBA you want as far as making a trade work under the salary cap. And so I do think you'll see this summer about a gajillion Bleacher Report articles involving the Pistons in a trade, mostly because we are very trade flexible at the moment. And we also have the 21st pick, which in a deep draft is a little bit desirable. And so you start to package all these assets that have a little bit of value, next thing you know, you find the right team and you might be able to do a 4-for-1 that makes sense for everybody. Leaving Durant and Kawhi Leonard in the dust, let's talk our first serious trade. So I'm going to go my least favorite to my most favorite. My least favorite here, and I got to take a sip of Celsius before we start here. Now, my least favorite blockbuster trade that I have here that works under the salary cap is actually the Devin Booker trade. Wait. I know I had mentioned that on previous podcasts. We were going to talk about Devin Booker trades. The sad truth is it doesn't make sense for the Pistons to trade for Devin Booker, mostly because it doesn't make sense for Phoenix to trade Devin Booker to the Pistons. Phoenix doesn't own their future first-round picks currently. And so to trade Devin Booker would put them into a tank that doesn't make sense because they don't own their first-round picks. And so the only reason you would trade Booker is if they got legitimate players that could help them, maybe not win, but at least compete in the short term. And I don't know if Ron Holland, Isaiah Stewart, Karis LeVert, and Duncan Robinson, if that's something, that's not a desirable package for Phoenix. Now, I guess I will say, in all of these trades, you will not hear the name Ausar Thompson. He's not in any of these trades. Now, if you wanted to add Ausar Thompson's name to the Devin Booker trade, that might make it look different. That might make it look different from Phoenix side. That obviously makes it look different from Detroit side. I'm not sure if any picks go out if that's the case, but that is the only way I see the Devin Booker trade work is if we trade Ausar Thompson, and I don't see the Pistons trading Ausar Thompson, so I just see this trade being dead before it even starts. So the Devin Booker trade to the Pistons, I'm sorry, Pistons fans that wanted me to talk about this one a little more, but this is the least favorite trade I have, and I don't think it's going to happen. De'Aaron Fox. Now, this is based off a new report. I was actually just about to hit record when I got a text that said, it was a report that essentially De'Aaron Fox will be looking to get out of San Antonio this offseason because of the emergence of Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle, which makes perfect sense. That's probably the best young backcourt in the NBA at the moment. Me personally, I like the three of them together. They work together. I would be a little bit shocked if San Antonio traded De'Aaron Fox. I'm looking at that as something that's working right now. But if for some reason with the salary cap and maybe De'Aaron doesn't like being in San Antonio, maybe he wants to be, the number 2 guy, number 1 guy on the team, and with Victor and with Castle and with Harper that, he's going to be, he's the fourth guy on the poster right now. That's for sure. So if he doesn't like that, that's where, like I said, why not us at the beginning? And so the trade for De'Aaron Fox is kind of like I've been saying. It's Isaiah Stewart, it's Karis LeVert, and it's Ron Holland, which gets us to $37 million. And currently, De'Aaron Fox is making $37 million on a 5-year contract. He's a 28-year-old guard. So on a 5-year contract, that takes him to 32, 33 years old. Should not be an issue, but he is a good shooter and has decent size. So I do think that contract, his age, is not an issue. And so the trade I have, like I said, is Stewart, LeVert, Holland. To get him, we're probably going to have to give up, it's at least 2, possibly 3 picks. So I have giving up the 21st pick in this draft. I have 2028 top 4 protected first round pick and 2030 top 4 protected first round pick. So I have Stewart, LeVert, Holland plus 3 picks essentially for De'Aaron Fox. 28 years old, all NBA level guard. I think that's what it's going to take. This is essentially a better version of your Mikal Bridges or your Desmond Bane trade. This De'Aaron Fox trade. Michael Porter Jr. Now, this one's been going on for forever. I know. I would assume Michael Porter Jr. gets traded this offseason. Why not the Pistons? The problem with this trade is he doesn't solve all of our problems. It's only the scoring problem that he solves. There's no playmaking problems that he solves. He's going to sit in the corner, shoot, or he's going to isolate and score. There's no assists, there's no playmaking with him, and there's not a lot of defense. And so the problem is you're going to pay a decent amount to get Porter and still have a couple holes on your roster. So the trade I have for Michael Porter is Isaiah Stewart, Karis LeVert, Ron Holland, and the 21st pick for Michael Porter Jr. I think that's about right. I think that's what it's going to cost. There's really not a ton to discuss here. It's if they get a better offer than that or not. I can't imagine Detroit sending 2 first-round picks and Holland and Stewart in a trade for Porter Jr. just because, like I said, we still need to build out the roster. He doesn't solve all the problems. This is a big one. This is one that Pistons fans like. I like it a little bit less than the crowd probably, but trade number 4 is the Trey Murphy trade. Now, he makes $25 million over the next 4 years. And now, real quick, Trey Murphy III's stats from last year, he played 66 games, and he's never had a problem playing games, which is a positive. Averaged 35 minutes, yada, yada. He has shot 8.6, 8.3, 7.8 threes per game over the last 3 years, and he's averaged right around 37% from 3 over the last 3 years.
Can you imagine?
That is pretty much exactly what the Pistons need. He also plays great defense, plays the 4. Maybe you could get away with playing him and Tobias together at the 3-4 because, I buried the lead here and I might have to pull this out and put it at the beginning. One of the only interviews that Trajan Langdons gave so far this offseason, and basically the only thing that he said that has any value is we are going to bring Tobias Harris back. Now, what that number is, I don't know. But Tobias Harris is going to be a Piston next year. And now the only thing with that is he is an unrestricted free agent. And so when we bring him back, it's not like we have his bird rights and we can kind of sign the whole free agent class first and then go over the salary cap to bring him in. We need to bring him in under the salary cap. He is an unrestricted free agent, can sign with any team that he wants. Now, I do think that there is a mutual admiration. I think we want him and he wants us. I think he wants to come back to Detroit. I think he has enjoyed his time here and he likes his role currently, which why wouldn't he? He was very successful down the stretch. And so all that being said, Pistons fans need to take that as gospel. There's no reason to not believe our front office when they say we are going to bring back Tobias Harris. What that number is going to be, I don't know. I would assume it's the $15 million a year. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 2-year, $30 million contract, something like that. But Tobias Harris will be a Piston next year. So back to the Trey Murphy trade, because like I said, this is one that Pistons fans, I believe, really want. The trade details I have are Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland, Marcus Sasser, the 21st pick in this year's draft, 2028 first-round pick, the first-round pick, both unprotected. Like I said at the beginning, you got to give something good to get something good. A 2028 unprotected first-round pick, most teams are going to look at the Pistons' current roster and think, that's going to be a pick in the 20s. In order to get some of these teams, in order to really get the fish on the hook. I do think that 2030 unprotected first round pick from the Pistons is what it's going to take to get some of these big names in the door. And Trey Murphy might not be the biggest name on the trade market, but age-wise and still potential-wise, I think he's one of the biggest names that I'm going to mention here. And that's why I'm saying we're going to give assets plus 3 first-round picks to bring in Trey Murphy. This is essentially, like I keep saying, the Mikal Bridges trade. This is the closest thing to it, actually. But I have it trade number 4. Like I said, that's actually not my favorite trade. I do think, back to the Michael Porter Jr. trade, Trey Murphy solves scoring problems, yes. And actually, Trey Murphy does have some playmaking abilities. So I was digging a little Trey Murphy tape recently. He does add some playmaking. And so I don't think he's going to turn into Jalen Johnson of the Hawks by any means. But, he did average, 3.5 assists last year, 3.8 assists, the year before. He is averaging, he is showing some playmaking, and he is only 25. And so if you're going to sell me on he is going to be our secondary playmaker next to Cade from the wing position, then I'm sold on this trade. But I don't exactly know if I can see that for Trey Murphy in his future, and that's a lot to bet on. That's a lot of picks. That's a lot of assets to bet on a guy, and if it doesn't work out, we're really stuck. Then you're Orlando, where Orlando doesn't have a lot of ways out of the current position that they're in. The Kyrie Irving trade. Now, before we get into this, there has been no reports out of Dallas that Kyrie Irving is available. This one, probably more than any of the other trades, is purely based off speculation. Dallas, it would make sense for them to trade Kyrie Irving just based off the fact they have Cooper Flagg, they have other young assets. I believe they have a pick coming up in this year's draft. It makes sense for them to build around Cooper Flagg. Now, also, Kyrie Irving is a perfect person to play next to Cooper Flagg and would probably make his life a whole lot easier. And so for the development of Cooper Flagg, does it make sense to keep Kyrie Irving? For me, I think it does. But just for the fun of it, like I said, why not us? If the Mavs do start taking calls on Kyrie Irving, Isaiah Stewart, Karis LeVert, Ron Holland, the 21st pick, and the 2028 first-round pick, maybe top 4 protected, is what I have for Kyrie Irving. So, those 3 guys plus 2 first-round picks for Kyrie Irving. Now, a 2028 top 4 protected first-round pick from the Pistons, when you're giving us Kyrie Irving, I'm not sure if teams are going to look at that, salivating, like that's a lot of value. And the 21st pick in this year's draft, maybe that isn't as valuable as I think it is either. And maybe Ron Holland isn't viewed the same around the league as I think he is either. But the problem with Kyrie is he is 32 years old. I think he's going to be 33 sometime next, early in the season next year. He's got a couple years left on his contract, but he probably needs to go to a contender that's ready to win right now. And maybe the Pistons, could be that. And I have this as the number 3 trade. But in a vacuum, Kyrie Irving fits the Detroit Pistons perfectly. We have the defense around him to make up for his lack of defense. And he gives us the playmaking and scoring that we desperately need. And so in a vacuum, Kyrie Irving makes perfect sense for the Pistons. Now, Kyrie Irving comes with more baggage than anybody I've listed so far. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know where Kyrie's head's at right now. I'm probably more of a Kyrie fan than most, as far as I don't think he ruins your locker room. I think he's a interesting character who has had controversial views in his past. But as far as how he fits into a current locker room at this point in his career, I don't think he's going to do it. I don't think this is Kevin Durant, where you have the potential to totally lose the locker room when you add him. I think Kyrie is only an additive at this point, which is hilarious because when he joined the Mavs, he was the opposite of that. And so he has I shouldn't say totally rebuilt his reputation, but he has rebuilt it to enough where the Mavs will be able to sell him for more than they traded for him, which is wild. That's essentially like, selling a new car 5 years later for more than you bought it. It just doesn't happen. And so this is a shocking turn of events for Kyrie Irving. And like I said, in a vacuum, I'd kind of love to have him. Trade number 2. This is kind of a personal favorite of mine, actually. I haven't seen this one out there a lot. But I have seen some rumors come out of Toronto. Now, don't worry, I'm not talking Brandon Ingram. The RJ Barrett to Detroit Pistons trade. And the part of the reason I like this trade is because I don't think it's going to take the same, and I don't think RJ Barrett costs the same as Trey Murphy does. I think Trey Murphy has more of an established role. I think teams can see where Trey Murphy fits perfectly into a championship team. I think RJ Barrett is still building up his reputation to being a good player on a winning team. But I do think RJ turned a huge corner these last couple of years as far as his playmaking. His shooting is flat out good enough. Now, is he a knockdown three-point shooter? No, but he averages 5.5 threes a game, so he's getting them up, and he shoots 35%. So that is what you need out of a lead guard. And he is 6'6" and plays decent defense and has great athleticism. And when you get drafted in the top 5, teams expect you to be the number 1 on a team or something close to it. And RJ Barrett hasn't really been that his whole career. But he's only 25 years old. He's grown into a very productive NBA player. And I'm just picturing Barrett with Cade, and adding him still leaves us some chips to go after somebody else. And so the trade I have for RJ Barrett is Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland, and the 21st pick in this year's draft. Money works. Put yourself in Toronto's shoes. Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland, first-round pick for RJ Barrett. If they wanted to shake up what they have going in Toronto, I know it's gotten a little stale out there, and I don't know if he's the first one gone. I know they would probably prefer to trade Ingram over Barrett, but, we don't want Ingram, and we would rather have Barrett, and so that just is what it is. I like RJ Barrett on the Pistons. Like I said, I think the price might be good, and I think the fit might be good. Something to really think about, Pistons fans. All right. The number 1 trade I have, the Giannis Antetokounmpo trade. Now, before you cut the podcast off because you think there's no way Giannis is coming to Detroit, I don't have Giannis coming to Detroit. I believe that if Giannis forces his way to the Miami Heat, that the Detroit Pistons are the perfect third team to make that trade happen. And so here's the trade I have. I have the Miami Heat acquiring Giannis Antetokounmpo. I have the Detroit Pistons acquiring Tyler Hero and Bobby Portis. Now, the Milwaukee Bucks in this trade would get Ron Holland, Kel'el Ware, Davion Mitchell, Isaiah Stewart, and then they're going to get Karis LeVert for salary cap reasons. They can cut him, they can keep him, whatever they want to do. The Milwaukee Bucks would also get the 2028 and 2030 unprotected first-round picks from the Pistons, and they would also get swaps in 27 and 29. They would also get the 28 and 30 unprotected first from the Miami Heat, and they would also get the swap in 27 and 29 from them as well. So essentially what would happen is they would get 4 first-round picks, 2 and 28, 2 and 30 from the Pistons and the Heat, unprotected. The Bucks would also get the right to swap in 27 and 29, and they would get the best pick of the 3 teams. And so if for some reason Detroit or Miami went bottoms up in 27 or 29, Milwaukee could flip with them and take their pick. Now, the thing with this trade is Milwaukee doesn't own their own picks. Kind of like what I said earlier about whoever I was talking about that also doesn't own their own picks, the Phoenix Suns, kind of like I was talking about with the Phoenix Suns. Any trade to Milwaukee has to include a few real prospects that could potentially help them in the short term or just give them a reason for hope in the short term. Now, I don't know if Ron Holland, Kel'el Ware, and Davion Mitchell are those short-term assets. They are real assets, though. Davion Mitchell has really brought his value up. He played really well down the stretch for the Heat. He had that little play-in spat where he was doing pretty well there. Kel'el Ware is a real prospect from the center position. He is very bouncy, has a lot of potential. And I personally, like I've been saying, I think Ron Holland has a lot of potential. I'm a big Ron Holland fan. I would actually vote not to trade Ron Holland, but in order to get any of these guys, you're going to have to trade something. So Ron's going out. All right, for the Detroit Pistons, getting all those details aside, in this trade, we acquire Tyler Hero and Bobby Portis. Like I keep saying in all the previous trades, none of those trades directly solved our 2 big issues, which are scoring and playmaking. I am personally I don't want to say I'm a big Tyler Hero fan, but I guess the world thinks Tyler Hero is not good. And I guess the fact that I think Tyler Hero is a very good, productive NBA player makes me a big Tyler Hero fan. The sad truth is I think people look at him and the way he carries himself and it's a big turnoff. It's actually quite the opposite. He has really stood out in every Heat locker room he's been in as A, a hard worker, and B, an easy teammate to get along with, and C, just a flat-out good player. He is so much more than just a knockdown shooter, which he is. He is a knockdown shooter, and putting him next to Cade would be a match made in heaven. But he has the playmaking ability closer. Like, he's better than Austin Reeves. He is. I guess for me, do people not realize that? Number one, he's a much better shooter, and he's a better playmaker in my opinion too. I like Tyler more than I like Austin. I really like this trade for the Pistons, and like I said, if it would take Giannis forcing his way to Miami for this trade to happen, but that's not totally out of the realm of possibilities. If Giannis, he's always had only a few teams on his list, and it's looking less and less likely that it's going to be the Knicks, unless for some reason Knicks make the finals, they get swept, and they just don't have the value to get him. I don't want to go down every Giannis Antetokounmpo, path that he could get traded to, but if we focused on Giannis wanting to get to Miami, which, I'm not sure why Miami would do this either, because it's left with him and Bam and a couple other pieces, and they still really don't have the assets to build out the rest of their roster. But purely from the Pistons standpoint, Tyler Hero, Bobby Portis would be fantastic additions to the team. So just quickly on where the Pistons stand in the East and if we should make any of these trades or not. I would say if we took a power rankings of the East right now as everything stands, you could clearly say the Pistons are the fourth best team in the East. You would clearly say the New York Knicks are the number one team in the East. They're up 3-0. I'm watching them right now. They're probably going to win tonight. New York has made themselves into a legitimate opponent in the NBA Finals. Now, do I think they're going to win the Finals? No, I don't. But I'm excited to watch it now. I've been kind of only been watching the Eastern Conference Finals with a half eye. I'll watch the first half, I'll watch the third quarter, but a lot of times by the fourth quarter, the game's over, so it doesn't even matter. Everybody in the world has been watching the Western Conference Finals with two eyes locked in, drooling. That is fantastic basketball. Now, there's been a couple games that weren't fantastic basketball, but 2 of those 4 games so far have been fantastic basketball. And a lot of the NBA is going to look at that series and just look at themselves and think we are a long ways away from Oklahoma City and San Antonio and maybe even the New York Knicks. So for the Pistons to make one of these quote-unquote blockbuster trades, you would, number one, have to assume that you're better than the Knicks right now, or at least would be competitive with the Knicks right now. And number two, you would have to also assume that you're going to be competitive with any of these teams that decide to make an all-in move. So, the Cavs, I would probably have above us as the third best team in the East, and I probably would have Boston as the second best team in the East, just out of respect to what Boston's done and Tatum getting healthy and what that's going to do for that team, and just out of respect for the front office of Boston and how they've been able to retool their rosters essentially every time it's needed a retool. The Giannis thing that I was just talking about is going to loom large. I don't know if it's going to happen before the draft. It's definitely going to happen sometime this summer. And it would make the most sense for Giannis to stay East. Now, I don't know if he is really thinking about that, but I would have a hard time thinking that these superstars don't think that in the back of their mind, because it's so much easier to make the finals going through the East. The West is going to have Oklahoma City and San Antonio for the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be a little bit of the Cavs Warriors meeting in the finals, where I do think it's going to be Thunder San Antonio in the Western Conference Finals. If it's not every year, it's going to be most years for the next 3 to 5 years. Now, the one trade that would ruin the NBA that I'm kind of burying here at the end is the Kevin Durant to the Warriors style trade, if Oklahoma City loses these next 2 games to San Antonio in a fashion where it looks like Victor Wembanyama is unbeatable, absolutely has the firepower to go get Giannis Antetokounmpo. And that, like I said, would be a almost NBA breaking trade. I don't know if it would make them head and shoulders better than San Antonio, but it would consolidate the stars even to it's a lot to digest, I guess is all I'm saying. And it's something to think about. It would make a little sense for OKC to do, wouldn't make it doesn't make all the sense in the world, but like I said, you could easily create a narrative where that makes a little bit of sense. We're in store for a really good NBA offseason. Like, if you like drama, if you like movement, there's a lot of teams that have figured out this new CBA, and I know everybody just keeps crying that we can't make moves with this new CBA. We can't make moves with this new CBA. We've had it for a couple years. Teams have learned how to plan for it. All right, that was a lot for this week. Like I said, I have a lot more in store for this Bad Boys podcast, this Bad Boys mini-series as we go through the early summer here. I want to hit free agency, even though we've talked a lot about Tobias, and that's pretty much going to be the Pistons free agency. I want to hit the draft a little bit harder than I have, and I want to hit some more smaller, realistic trades to maybe fill out the bench a little more, or maybe fill out that last starting spot that's not going to cost us 3 to 4 first-round picks, which is probably more the route we're going to go. So anyways, everybody, thanks for listening. I apologize again for leaving everybody hanging during that Cavs series. I'm going to be here for you all summer. Hoy and I are coming back with the main show soon enough. I don't have anything official on that yet, but it's going to get its reboot. We're coming back for you, I promise. All right, it's good talking to everybody. Good night.